I know that I bring a totally different way of thinking to the business than anybody else on the team.
That was Marnie explaining why executives need to get more involved in inclusion initiatives for mental illness. Marnie works at Expedia, helping teams tell stories, which she describes as her dream job. Like me, Marnie lives with bipolar. Undiagnosed for a long time, she went through 2 marriages and divorces before an offhand comment in an acting class nudged her to explore her mental state. In this episode of Silent Superheroes, Marnie shares that odd offhand comment made by her acting teacher. We roleplay how a manager or HR professional should handle a conversation with an employee with mental illness. Marnie explains her thorough, structured way for identifying medication side effects, and she reflects on the positive and negative ways mania has played in her career. Before we get started for this episode, just a couple of administrative notes. There was a problem with the recording equipment I used for this episode, and as a result, the dialogue has a few dropouts. For example, there are places where half a word is missing. It didn't affect my ability to understand what was being said while I was editing, but if you find it distracting, I totally understand if you prefer not to listen to it. Second, Silent Superheroes is, to use the common word, a side hustle for me, alongside my full-time job, my family, and a few other projects. Silent Superheroes comes from my strong belief that these stories have to be told, and we have to start getting comfortable with talking about mental health at work. I want these stories to be interesting and informative, and to respect your time, so I put a lot of care into each episode. Typically, the original recordings are anywhere from 1 to 2 hours, and I try to edit those down to about 45 minutes, and that process can be time-consuming. I originally set myself a schedule of releasing an episode every other Tuesday, and that was based, I think, on something I'd read about regular schedule helping to build listenership. Over the last few episodes, I've been feeling increasing stress sticking to that schedule, partly because of those other demands in my life. While editing this episode, I decided I needed to take a break, and I delayed the episode a week. I don't want this project to falter because I've put too much pressure on myself to meet a deadline. Burnout is a real risk for me, and I need to take care of my mental health so I can keep doing this. Moving forward, I'm going to go a little easier on myself and give myself permission to be late with episodes. I've already got some great episodes recorded. We have one about body dysmorphic disorder, OCD, alcoholism, and there's a group discussion with a psychiatrist, a counselor, and a mental health advocate about the challenges facing silent superheroes in work. So even if it doesn't take me 2 weeks and maybe sometimes 3 weeks to get these out, hopefully you'll still bear with me. Remember, Marnie and I are just 2 people talking about our personal experience living with mental illness. If you're considering a change to your treatment plan, please consult with a trained medical professional. My name's James Pratt. I'm the host of Silent Superheroes, and I'm really glad that you're here.
Welcome to the Silent Superheroes podcast, a series of frank conversations about mental health at work.
I'm here with today's guest, Marnie. Marnie, nice to meet you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, James. It's really nice to be here.
Awesome. So why don't you start by telling us who you are? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I'm a 52-year-old woman. I have 5 children. I've been married and divorced twice. My vocation is I am a storyteller. I have my dream job at Expedia Group. I'm there to help the engineering department tell better stories.
And I'm very grateful that you're a storyteller for the purposes of what we're about to do.
I know, right? It's really going to freak me out.
No pressure, Marnie. No at all. Good stuff. So we were connected by a mutual friend, and I believe we share some things around mental health. So why don't you tell us about what you deal with in your mental health?
Well, I have bipolar. I was diagnosed at a late date. I was 49 when I was diagnosed. And it's not just bipolar. I have other things that go along with it. Obviously, often there are other conditions that show up when you have a mental illness. So I have some ADHD. I have some OCD. I have this condition where I pick at my face.
Oh, okay. What's that called?
It's like dermotrichinosis, something like that.
Okay.
Because there's the one where you pick your hair. Yeah. But mine is that I pick my skin. Yeah, and it's just an anxiety-related thing. So I have anxiety, depression, all of that.
Yeah.
I'm just a mess.
It's quite the bag of things to be managing.
Yeah, and I didn't even know.
You found your bipolar diagnosis late, I guess, or maybe later than some people do.
Yeah, because I look back and I see that as when I was younger, I had similar traits. I just thought I had this quirky personality.
What was it that led you to explore or to talk to somebody who said, hey, I think you have bipolar?
Yeah, well, I was being treated for depression and anxiety at a low level by my family physician. And I decided to take an acting class. And so I was taking this Meisner acting class, and it was awesome and it was perfect. And I felt like I was in my place. And one night after class, I'd had a particularly intense, I guess you call acting session with this one other person. And after the class, my teacher said, you remind me of my sister, and sometimes I just want to sit on her. And I thought, that's a very interesting observation of me, but it really got me, and it really made me think, is there something else going on here? I don't know why that was the wake-up call, but it was. And it was after that class that I went to my physician and I said, look, I think maybe I've got something more like ADHD or bipolar. She gave me these questionnaires to fill out. I don't know if you remember the questionnaires.
Yeah.
So I filled out the questionnaires and both came back positive. And she said, well, you need to see a psychiatrist. That's when I met my wonderful psychiatrist who helped me get better.
Was the person in the acting class, did they say, like, my sister has bipolar and you remind me of her? Just like...
He described her a little bit as, she just has all this energy and she just needs to be sat upon to get back to normal.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I know you say you don't have any idea why you followed it up, but like...
I just had this gut feeling that there was something more going on here. And really in hindsight, if I look back at some major events in my life, like the fact that I've been married and divorced twice, it really made me realize I was part of the problem, right? I started thinking about behaviors I had in the marriages where I would just do things like go out and spend $1,000 because I wanted to and because, of course, we'll be fine. Right? I had this manic view that everything would be fine. Well, that's pretty detrimental to a relationship. So it's not all my fault. But I do, it is an area where I now worry. I've been single for I was in a relationship for a while after my last marriage, but I've been divorced for like 9 years. And I've been single for 3, and I worry that I'll never meet somebody because this condition is hard to deal with.
It is. Let's go back for a second to you described you've been married twice. You look back and you see some of the bipolar behaviors coming up in your marriage.
Well, I kind of categorize there's like 3 states of my bipolar that I've really experienced. There's probably more, but the 3 that are really dramatic to me. And they all showed up in my marriage. One is depression. And when you're barely able to get out of bed for 6 months, that's pretty hard on a marriage, right? So that's a pretty obvious one. And you have 5 kids and you're trying, it's very difficult. And so then it puts a lot of pressure on your partner to be there where you can't be. And that's hard on a marriage. And then there's manic. And I really have like 2 manic states. One is where I'm so excited and I've got a zillion ideas and my brain is just processing things in a way that I really believe I'm having the most creative ideas that anybody ever has had. Right. That's and I'll just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. Now, that state isn't as hard on the marriage, but the third, which I think is most destructive, and I call it my black mania, which is where I'm manic, but I'm angry. Wow. Yeah. And so an angry manic person is like the best attorney you've ever had. Yeah. And I could talk somebody into the fetal position. And that's not healthy for a marriage. I just couldn't stop.
I'd not heard that expression before, black mania. Is that a kind of a Marnie kind of creation or
Marnieism.
Something? A Marnieism. It's nice.
Because I kind of think I have this light mania and I have this dark mania. The light mania is the one I love and I miss. and was hard to let go. But the dark mania was never hard to let go because it's so damaging on me and everybody around me.
It's almost like you're making a trade-off between there's this thing that I like, lots of energy and creativity. Then there's these two dark states.
My psychiatrist is amazing. Okay, one of the first things he said to me was, we do not want to make you bland. Yeah. Right? So when we were going through our chemistry experiment with our medications, our goal was that I would still have some range, right? So I do have some peaks and valleys. They're just not as high or low. So I love that about him. And he said, the reason I don't want to, make bland is because pretty much all the amazing things that have been done in our world have been done by people who have a mental illness, probably bipolar. So I like that.
Yay.
Rock on, bipolar.
Yeah. You mentioned the word bland, and kind of you and I nodded because we know nothing about bipolar medication. Might be worth explaining why some people with bipolar end up being, in inverted commas, bland, and what you meant by that.
Well, interestingly, one of the first books I read after our diagnosis was called An Unquiet Mind by Kay Redfield. And I really related to it because she's a psychiatrist who has bipolar type 1, very, very extreme version of bipolar. And I remember her saying, I did not want to go on medication because I didn't want to lose that. And yet it was destroying her life. And so I felt the same way. I just felt like I'm going to lose what makes me special and unique. And I think medication can do that, right? It can numb you. It can make you feel like no emotion if you go that far, right?
Because, bipolar is a condition which has very volatile emotional swings, right? To the up, to down, and vice versa. And so many bipolar medications take the range away,
right?
But they take the personality with it, perhaps.
Yeah. And so my doctor and I really try to keep me on the lowest doses possible. I'm on higher doses on my antidepressants because I need it more. But everything else, I'm pretty much on the lowest dose, or like half a dose or a quarter of a dose. And we've just found that that's a good balance for me.
So you mentioned chemistry experiment.
Yes.
Walk us through your personal chemistry experiment.
Oh, well, it took about a year.
Okay.
Which is a big investment.
But not bad.
Not too bad.
Yeah.
I would go to my psychiatrist every 2 weeks, and we would talk about what my symptoms were. And he'd given me this chart, which was manic symptoms and depression symptoms, both on the same page, because you can have both at the same time. Often I'll have manic and be sort of depressed at the same time. And so I would come in, we would talk about some of my symptoms. Was this medication effective? And often I would have terrible side effects. So I remember one medication, and I can't remember the name of it, but I remember my son came over to visit, my older son, and I was sitting on the floor whispering. I couldn't speak. It was weird. I could only talk in a very, very whisper voice, and my cognition was off. I almost couldn't think. I felt like I was just like immobilized, completely immobilized. And that was the kind of experience I had to go through as we were figuring out what medications would work and which ones would not.
It's a fairly serious side effect.
Yeah, it was pretty big. Yeah. I just went off that one right away.
Yeah. Cold turkey.
Cold turkey.
Nice. What are you on right now?
I'm on a ton of medications, partially, not all for bipolar, but I am on venlafaxine, which is the medication for my depression and anxiety, my primary medication for that. I take a tiny amount of Vraylar, which helps me with my mood as well, and was really intended to help with the picking. And it has a bit. I mean, if you had seen me 3 months ago, you would have noticed that I had this giant scab on my chin where I would just pick and pick and pick. I would imagine that there were, pimples or something, and I would find a way to just, attack myself. And that has helped, though it's not completely gone. But I find that if I go on a higher dose of Vraylar, I have some cognitive side effects. I take Adderall for the ADHD symptoms, and I take propranolol for the the tremors that my medication causes. And then I take some lithium as well.
Okay.
Just to add some spice.
So let's why not? One of the things that's come up in earlier episodes of the podcast, as we've consistently talked about this experimentation that you go through, I found that a lot of people don't know what the potential side effects are before they start taking something. So I'm curious, what's been your experience of finding out about managing those side effects? Because it sounds like a good to me.
Well, in the beginning, I did what probably most people do, which is take the medication and then have a side effect and then read the brochure. The little insert that says, these are the side effects you could have, or go on the internet and look it up. And I did do that. But then as I noticed that I am sensitive to medications, then I started I would just talk to my doctor about it. What are the potential side effects? And then whenever I would get the medication, I would read that insert. I would just want to know, like even highlight stuff that I tend to be more prone to having happen. And that way I'd know it was that medication. Because when you have a whole bunch of medications, it's hard to tease apart which one's causing the side effect, or is it a combination of things that are. So tracking is really important.
Oh. How do you do the tracking? So you highlight stuff in the brochure. Is there anything that you do on an ongoing basis then to track?
I sometimes write down things that I want to take to my psychiatrist because I will forget, but most often if I'm having a side effect, I contact my psychiatrist right away.
Yeah. I think this is really important. I think of everybody I've spoken to, including myself, the approach that you have taken to finding the right blend for you seems to be very organized, thoughtful, thorough.
Well, thank you.
And I think it's worth underlining that, because for many people that year they went through of trying to find the right medications are torturous.
They are.
People sometimes ask me what I've learned from making this podcast. One of the things I often share is that I've noted people wait too long until there's a moment of crisis before they seek help. Bipolar had certainly caused problems in Marnie's life, for example, her divorces. But her journey to diagnosis didn't start with a crisis. It started with a sentence, "You remind me of my sister." Marnie listened to her instincts and followed them with curiosity, and she was open to the possibility that she was part of the problem. While getting diagnosed didn't fix the problem, it did give her the opportunity to learn how to work with it better. I think Marnie has taken a grade A student approach to learning to live with her bipolar. There is no better example of that than her discipline with medication and its side effects. I love the way she takes the list of potential side effects and marks them up with things that she thinks might affect her. And I'll definitely be doing that next time I try a new medication. Coming up in the next section, Marnie talks about her work. And that leads us to a rather interesting role play of a manager or HR professional having a conversation with their employee who's disclosed that they have a mental illness. Do you talk about your bipolar in the context of that work?
I do. I pretty much tell everybody I have bipolar. I create this, I felt when I realized I had it and I realized I had probably passed it on to my children, I felt like, oh, this is the universe saying you have something to do, right? You need to be a voice. You need to be a champion. And so it makes me feel awesome that I get to be a champion for that, even though I have my own personal struggles that are mostly inside. One of the things that I'm doing is at Expedia, we've just started an employee resource group.
That's great.
Called the Ability Inclusion Movement, which is all about, called AIM.
AIM, yeah, nice. Yeah. Well played.
Thank you. And the whole purpose is to help Expedia increase awareness, reduce bias, and overcome challenges for people with disabilities in the workplace. And we're really making a push on mental illness as one of the disabilities. So I'm pretty excited about that.
In the work that you've done on that so far, what biases and other experiences have you learned about that people with a mental illness have faced?
I had an an experience when I first started. I was a consultant at Expedia before I got hired as a full-time employee. And I don't really put anybody on the spot, but I had an experience where I discovered that somebody I was working with and coaching had bipolar. And she wasn't willing to talk about it with her manager. And I encouraged her to share. And she decided over time, yes, I feel like I can now share and I need to, because she was going through some problems with her medication. She needed to go get that taken care of. It's really hard to explain to your boss, I need to take 2 months off to go through a chemistry experiment. But the boss didn't react very positively to it when I mentioned that she was going to disclose. And I didn't say what it was. She said, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. It puts me at risk. And I thought, oh, I don't think I can work here. But it ended up working out in that I had inadvertently had a conversation with HR about it. And they were like, this is not the way this is meant to be. This was just a junior person. She did not know what she was supposed to be doing. And this is the kind of thing I want to overcome, right? How do managers deal with an employee who has it? How does an employee feel safe bringing it up? You know, if this person had had cancer, totally different response. But the fact that it was a mental illness scared the person.
That not knowing what to say is something I hear over and over again.
Yeah.
I had a HR colleague, worked for a different company, approached me recently and said, I think somebody is going to disclose something to me, and I think it's around mental health.
Mm-hmm.
What do I do? And, you know, you would think somebody in HR maybe would have, you know, the words, understanding, but the truth is that we don't, because we don't talk about it enough.
Right.
If you were working in HR or you were a manager, how would you handle that situation? Someone says, I'm managing anxiety or depression or bipolar or schizophrenia or whatever it might be. What would you do?
Well, I would want to fully understand the situation. So I wouldn't be, don't tell me, right? I mean, I'd be, tell me. Yeah. Tell me what's going on. And I would treat it like it was any other sort of illness, right? I think it's as simple as that. But I think in some cases it is harder for people who don't have a mental illness to relate.
So let's role play this out for a second.
Okay.
You're a storyteller, somebody's done acting, you're good on beat, right? All right. So we're now having a one-on-one. I work for you, Marnie.
Okay.
So, hey, Marnie, just wanted to let you know about something that I think has been affecting my performance. I've learned that I have like a major clinical depression. I want to let you know and talk to you about how that affects my work.
Okay. Well, first, I'm really, really thank you for telling me. And I'm sorry that you're having to go through this.
It's been hard.
Yeah. So could you tell me a little bit about what you need?
Yeah, I'm kind of still in the, in the early days. I've had a really hard time kind of getting up and getting to work. Maybe you noticed I've been kind of late a lot lately. And I've been struggling a lot with focus in my work at times. And as a man, apparently it's common with depression that it makes you really irritable and aggressive. And I feel like I've been a bad teammate at times too.
Yeah, that would feel terrible.
Yeah. So,
do you have a doctor you're working with? I mean,
yeah, I found a psychiatrist I've just started working with. We're working with some different medications, trying to figure out what helps. I don't feel like I found the right thing yet, but I'm definitely working on it.
How is that affecting your ability to work?
Yeah, it's a great question. Honestly, one of the medications just made me feel very disconnected and distant from the world, which just made it really hard for me to be in meetings and things like that. So those have been the so far. What I'm trying right now so far seems like it's working, but we're still early days.
Well, from what I've learned, because I know that this is not uncommon, what I've learned about mental illness and when you're working through it is that sometimes you need time off work to get through the chemistry experiment. And have you considered that?
I feel like I don't want to put my job at risk by being the person who takes a bunch of time off. So I'm a little worried about.
Well, we're not your job's at risk. I'm grateful that you're telling me. And I would love it if we could think about what would be an appropriate amount of time off for you so that you could get through the chemistry experiment. What other support you need. I mean, think about that. What other support do you need? And then maybe talk to your psychiatrist about what he would recommend, he or she would recommend for managing some time, taking that time.
I've got to say, like, as you were going that last bit, like I felt my heart filling up, like, God, this person really cares about me.
Yeah.
Even though we were playing doing a role play. So I love the way that you handled that.
Thanks. I'm sure there are things I could improve, but
no doubt we were working on the spot there. But I think that, you asked great questions. You kind of gently nudged me in the direction of resources, right? Like, if you don't know what you want, talk to your psychiatrist about what you might need. I love the way that you handled that.
And I may have said, I think it might have been helpful to say, I don't know what all the resources are that we have available to provide. So let me do some research on that too. Yeah. And then let's get back together tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or 2 days or whatever.
Yeah. I feel like we didn't do employee resource group justice.
Oh, it's so new.
Yeah. Talk to me about what it is you're trying to accomplish through your employee resource group, particularly as it relates to people with mental illness.
Yeah. Well, what's really interesting is we're in the forming stage of it. So we've got a board of directors and we haven't done voting for officers or anything yet, but we're having a kickoff meeting with the community of people who are interested. More and more and more people are signing up to be part of it, which I think is great. So one of the things is building community. I think we have a really great opportunity to build community with people that are interested in or have mental illness. I thought this would be mostly around disabilities like people that are blind or deaf, but what I'm finding is that all the talk is happening around mental illness. So I really see this as a great platform for us to do a variety of things. And the first thing I want to do is a speaker series. I want to bring people in from outside Expedia to talk to all the people who are interested about what it is, how you can, how do you relate to it? Because I think the stat, I might be wrong, is like 60% of people have a mental illness. And so there are those people around you or have someone in their lives who have one.
That's right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's a huge population that could be really interested in this. So even my psychiatrist had agreed to come in and talk.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that I want to do.
I'm really excited to hear about your employee resource group, and hopefully we can keep in touch, because I think in the community of companies that you and I work in, hopefully we will be in the earlier wave of companies that really tackle this issue head on. And hopefully part of what I'm trying to achieve here is to influence how companies think about mental health and mental illness, by educating whoever's listening about what those experiences are like. And then, as we have done, generate some ideas for, if you're a manager, how you talk to somebody about their mental health and mental illness. Yeah,
like our resource group is really a grassroots. It's from the ground up. And I think there needs to be more done at the executive level, right? I mean, I think there needs to be more awareness raised and for a lead, they have to understand the benefit. Right. What is the benefit? Well, there's some legality, of course. But I think that there is benefit because I know that I bring a totally different way of thinking to the business than anybody else on the team. And there are other people who bring that too, their own version of that. But the way I think actually is an advantage.
Yeah, there's diversity and inclusion research that supports this, at having a diverse workforce, whether that's gender diverse, religious diversity, people with mental illness, people with disabilities, that population tend to find better solutions to the problem a business faces. But the trade-off is that they're generally slower because it takes more effort to work together. And we work in a world where speed is really important. It's valued highly.
Yeah.
I'll keep this short. That roleplay was one of my favorite things to happen on the podcast. I threw it in there as an idea, and I want to thank Marnie for rolling with it because there really was no preparation. What a beautiful job she did. She showed how easy it is to have empathy, to show care, and move a conversation about mental health to a good place. Now, before leaving to strike out on her own, Marnie spent 22 years working at Microsoft. Earlier in my career, I also worked at Microsoft, and I also happened to be undiagnosed bipolar at the time. My experience was that Microsoft rewarded people who had the behaviors that had come with bipolar, and I wondered if Marnie's experience was the same. So you did 22 years at Microsoft. What did you do when you were there?
I did a lot of different things. I started in the product support division, which is customer service and support now. I was there for 8 years. I started on the phones answering customer questions about, Microsoft products on the Mac. And then I got involved in this change initiative called Customer and Partner Experience. I had a lot of really great jobs at Microsoft. So my last job at Microsoft was director of marketing for Office in the US. And during that role, I just was having this feeling that I was done at Microsoft, but I wasn't sure. I was single. I had 5 kids. I was bipolar, didn't know it. And I went to a TED conference. I went to Women in 2010 and sat in the front row for every single talk and sat there looking at them going, I want what they have. I want that kind of passion. I want to be doing what I love. And so I took about a year to make the decision, but I left the company in 2011. We hadn't really fully recovered from the 2008 recession, and all my friends thought I was crazy. But I left and I started a coaching and facilitation practice, did my TED conference, and then ran out of money. Yeah. This is bipolar, right? I made this rash decision, sort of. I didn't have a fallback. And I spent my life savings to, have a fun experience. But the TED conference is the best experience I've ever had. And it changed me. And so it allowed me to be qualified for the kind of roles that I was able to do after that.
You think about the TED conference, which feels like a real high point for you. You knew you had bipolar at the time, presumably.
No.
Oh, you didn't? Okay, good.
I did not know I had bipolar at the time.
Okay. What would be different if you were to try to do that conference now?
Ooh, what would be different?
Coaching question.
I not a whole lot.
Okay.
That sounds kind of weird. What might be different is that I might have been able to play a bit more of a supportive role to the other members of the team, whereas I was pretty focused on what I was doing, and I was more excited about that than anything, right?
Yeah.
So I made that the most important thing, and that doesn't necessarily then really make the rest of the team feel like they've got great stuff that they're doing, right? It makes it seem like all theirs is behind the scenes and mine's right out there in the front. And I think now I might recognize that more and try to bring more people into the speaker side of the house, because that's the part I got to do, and let them build some relationships with those very senior, wonderful, awesome people, and maybe be more involved in it, because that's kind of the sexy part of a TED conference.
It's like you're in a band and you were the front man.
Right. I mean, if you look at performers, a lot of performers have mental illness. And I think that, and are introverted. And I'm introverted, and yet I'm a performer. Yeah. And so I get a lot of joy out of being in the front of the room.
Yeah.
And I think having the tendency toward mania, when I'm in front of the room, I'm a little manic. Yeah. So I'm a little high.
Yeah.
From my own mania.
Yeah. How does your light mania help you be a facilitator and a coach and a storyteller in the work that you do?
It's so hard to describe. I feel like my brain is firing on all cylinders. So what happens is, let's say I'm in front of the room and I'm doing facilitation. I can keep track of all the little anecdotes that everybody is saying. And then I weave those in to the conversation later. And people think, oh my, how did you do that? Right? It's just, I have a capacity that I didn't have. And I can actually observe things more deeply. I'm definitely more engaged. I'm definitely more present, which seems weird because you'd think when you're manic, you'd be kind of all over the place, crazy. And yes, of course, that can happen. But mostly for me, when I'm manic, I'm pretty focused because my brain's just working so well. There's just something about being in the front of the room that changes it for me. I don't even know how to explain it.
Yeah.
I think it is that being really present. And I think when my mania is a little bit more out of control, I'm not present with it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that means that I can control my mania.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
I have to have medication. I have to be aware of what's going on so that I can address any times that I'm out of balance. But sometimes I'm out of balance. It's just the way it is.
We were talking about your experiences at Microsoft. When you were at Microsoft, you were living with undiagnosed bipolar. How do you think that contributed to you being successful?
It contributed to me being successful and unsuccessful. There was this great story in Harvard Business Review when I was getting ready to leave the company. I can't find it. If I can find it, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
But it was about this, not condition, but kind of situation in business where you have these overachievers who climb really quickly, then they plateau, and you're going to lose them during the plateau. And then they climb, then they plateau. And I read this article going, oh my God, this is me. This is me. Because what I would say about my experiences at Microsoft is that people at Microsoft would say, sometimes Marnie was a kick-ass rock star. I got 2 4.5 reviews in a row. I mean, that's a big deal at Microsoft.
Yeah.
And sometimes we wonder what happened to Marnie. And that was my bipolar.
Yeah.
So I see it, right? I would have these incredible growth periods at the company where I was getting promoted every year, getting my wages doubled. I mean, these great things.
Yeah.
And then I would be bored and I didn't know what to do. I wasn't self-aware enough. So I'd take up a hobby that had nothing to do with work.
Yeah.
And then I'd get distracted from work by this other thing.
You get super obsessed with the thing, whatever it was.
Super obsessed.
Yeah. Hearing you talk about that growth plateau makes me think also if you're undiagnosed, that can be very disturbing because it's hard to understand why you can't keep it up.
Right. It would just self-reprimand myself all the time.
Yeah.
I thought, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What the frick is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Why can't you do what you just did?
Yeah.
But often I'd be just so into whatever else I was doing that I would also I knew I would sabotage myself.
Yeah.
I knew I was sabotaging myself, but I did not know what to do about it at all.
Perhaps like your subconscious was trying to get you to slow down a bit, maybe?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or go to my doctor.
If you were to go back now you understand bipolar, now you know how to manage it. How do you think you might approach that period differently?
Well, if I was medicated and was in a balanced state, I know when I'm getting bored. I can recognize that now. And I then have to have a conversation with my boss, right? Around what can I do that's going to add value to the business, but it's also going to kind of get me excited again.
Yeah. So you would want your workplace to support the ability for you maybe to cycle through different projects or, even completely different roles to keep you engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what they do at Expedia that's so cool? They do rotations.
Nice.
They have this whole very formal, but everybody can do it kind of rotation process. And I actually think that's going to be great for me. Because at the point where I feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know, I'm not inspired, I could rotate into another org and my head count goes with me and then I come back or not. So it's a pretty cool program. I think it'd be helpful for someone with bipolar.
When you think about your mental illness work, how have you been supported or not on your journey with bipolar?
I think I've been totally supported, but I don't think I've asked for much. The one thing I haven't done a good job about at work is being an advocate when I need when I really do need to leave the office, right? I'll get to the end of the day sometimes and I am just like empty. I've used every bit of energy that I have. My brain is not working right. And I really just need to go home. I will just like white knuckle it so that I don't have to say, I got to go. Now, if it's for my kid, if it's for anything else, I am willing to say it.
Yeah.
But if I'll make up an excuse. But I do think it's not helping if I don't say, this is part of my mental illness.
Yeah.
And I need to take care of myself.
It's such an important point that you made about if it's for something else, if it's for one of my kids, or I have an appointment, or someone's coming around to fix the boiler.
Right.
You want to think twice about saying, I need to not be here.
Right.
But because it's something for you, something that you need, it's hard to ask sometimes.
Well, it's hard to describe it even. To say, oh, I'm feeling like my brain is tingling, right? Or I'm having an out-of-body experience where I don't actually feel in connection with my body. It just happens sometimes. And it doesn't mean that I need new medication. Sometimes I just need to rest.
If there's somebody listening who just got their bipolar diagnosis, like let's think of, Marnie at 49, you've come out of the psychiatrist's office, you've done the checklist, and the checklist has said bipolar. Mm-hmm. What would you want to whisper in Marnie's ear?
You have to change who you are to treat your bipolar. You can treat your bipolar and still be you.
That's great. I love that. If there's somebody listening, to this and you wanted to offer them some words of encouragement or support or wisdom, what would you say?
Talk about your illness or your mental state, right? And not necessarily everybody, at first, talk about it with people who are totally safe. Yeah. Your friends, your family, because that can be hard, right? Practice with the people who love you and then start, testing out who can you share this with, because you do need support. So people need to know.
Marnie, this has been a wonderful conversation. Before we wrap up, what else would you want to say?
I hope people listen to this podcast. I've been listening to these podcasts, and they really do make you feel like you're not alone. There are all sorts of really great tips and hints and of what you can do to manage and be in community around it. So I guess I would just say you're not alone. You're not broken, and you are gifted.
It's a wonderful sentiment. Marnie, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, James. This has been amazing.
Bipolar is a complex condition because there are different states of mind that can be disorienting. For example, last weekend, I suddenly decided to throw out a bunch of t-shirts and organize my closet. Now, was that a necessary project, or was that a little phase of hypomania? Likewise, if I feel like I'm underperforming at work, is that an accurate judgment, or is that depression stopping me from seeing my contributions? In a work context, some of these states of mind are desirable, as Marnie describes her light mania, but there are some aspects that are less desirable in work. For example, depression or dark and angry mania. The challenge you face as you start to wrestle with bipolar is that you have to put a box around some of these more extreme states. I've been wrestling with this a little lately. Sometimes I feel like maybe I'm missing a bit of my edge or my drive, and I find myself wondering, would I be better off if I was unmedicated? Fortunately, though, I get to listen to these episodes, and I'm reminded of the wreckage that can come with undiagnosed bipolar. So I'll deal with feeling a little less sharp and having a little less drive. If you're listening to this from the perspective of someone involved in creating culture, I think Marnie shared some great ideas and insight. Listen to how she conducts that role play. Think about the role job rotations could play in your business for people who have ADHD or bipolar, but also for everybody learning new skills and getting new challenges. And I think it's important to ask your executive team to get involved in your employee resource groups, your D&I initiatives, and whatever it is you're doing around mental health. And lastly, if you are trying to do more for mental health at your workplace, quite sincerely, thank you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating and a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get notifications of new episodes as they're released, you can either sign up for our newsletter at www.silentsuperheroes.com, or you can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/silentsuperheroes.
Take your mental health seriously. If you need to speak to someone, you can call 1-800-273-8255 or text crisistextline.org at 741-741. Both provide 24/7 confidential counseling to people in the United States. Worldwide, visit iasp.info/resources/crisis_centers/. To help others find the Silent Superheroes podcast, please leave a review on iTunes or your favorite podcasting service.